On July 23, 2007, Amanda Rose, 24 years old, stepped onto the long green corridor of Olympic National Park in Washington state. Her plan was simple and firm, a solitary trek lasting a full week. She was not new to the wilderness. Dozens of trails along the West Coast already lived in her muscles and memory. Her pack was complete, her body prepared, her confidence earned. She chose the Hoh Rainforest Trail, a place of immense beauty and deep isolation. Here, the forest breathes like a living cathedral. Trees stretch upward nearly 50 meters, and the air hangs heavy with moisture, almost tropical. The journey demands 5 to 7 days, far from towns, roads, and noise. Only the rare hiker or a patrolling ranger ever breaks the silence. Before entering, Amanda followed protocol. She signed in at the ranger station, detailed her route, listed her camps, and marked July 30th as her return. The ranger on duty, a middle-aged man with silver in his beard, inspected her gear, issued overnight permits for designated campsites, reminded her about bears and food storage, and wished her safe passage. She drove to the trailhead, parked, locked her car, concealed the keys beneath the wheel, lifted her pack, and crossed the threshold into the forest's shadowed depths. The first 2 days unfolded gently. The trail was clear. Streams offered quiet places to rest. She photographed moss-covered giants and fleeting wildlife, deer, squirrels, even a distant bear that glanced her way and moved on. Each night, she set her tent at approved campsites, cooked simple meals on her stove, and recorded her thoughts in a journal meant only for her. She crossed paths with others, a couple, a cluster of students, a lone photographer. Polite greetings. Brief words about weather and routes. Then separation again, as the forest reclaimed its silence. On the evening of July 25, the third day, Amanda arrived at Campsite 7, a small clearing carved from the trees. A rough table. A fire ring. A simple latrine. She pitched her tent, prepared dinner, and sat near the fire as dusk settled. That was when she heard footsteps. A man emerged from the trees wearing a ranger's uniform, green shirt with the National Park Service emblem, sturdy boots, wide-brimmed hat. A radio, flashlight, and knife hung at his belt. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, tall, powerfully built, dark hair streaked with gray, eyes sharp and observant. He introduced himself as James Carter, a ranger assigned to patrol the area. Amanda showed her permit. He reviewed it, nodded, and asked routine questions, whether she was alone, where she came from, where she was headed. She answered calmly, Seattle. Solo. Completing the full Hoh route to the coast. He warned her that the trail ahead grew rougher, that streams could become dangerous after rain, and advised caution. They spoke briefly, about wildlife, the park, the work of a ranger. After about 10 minutes, he stood, wished her a good night, and disappeared back into the forest. Amanda went to sleep around 10. Inside her tent, the forest murmured, leaves shifting, an owl's distant call, water whispering nearby. Exhaustion carried her quickly into sleep. Then the sound came. Sharp. Violent. Like fabric being torn. Darkness surrounded her, moonlight barely seeping through the tent walls. The sound came again. In that instant, understanding struck, a blade slicing through the tent from outside. She tried to scream. A gloved hand sealed her mouth. Another crushed her throat, stealing her breath. She fought, kicking, striking, but strength overwhelmed her. A large figure forced its way through the opening. In the dim light, she saw his face. James Carter. He held her until resistance faded and her vision dimmed. Only then did he ease his grip enough for her to breathe, never removing his hand from her mouth. With practiced speed, he bound her wrists, then her legs, pulling the knots tight. A cloth gag silenced her completely. He dragged her from the tent, lifted her onto his shoulder, and carried her into the forest. Minutes blurred together, 20, maybe 30, through dense undergrowth, across a stream, up uneven ground where no trail existed. There was no point in screaming. No one was near. The forest absorbed everything. At last, he stopped. Before her stood a small wooden structure hidden among the trees, part hut, part shed. Its roof sagged under moss, its walls darkened by years of damp air. He unlocked the door, pulled her inside, shut it, and turned the key. The interior was pitch black. The smell of wet wood and decay filled the air. And the forest closed around them once more. James struck a match and lit the kerosene lamp fixed to the wall. A dull, yellow glow spread through the space, revealing a single cramped room, roughly 4 by 5 meters. Rough wooden planks formed the floor, log walls pressed in from all sides. In one corner stood a small metal stove with stacked firewood beside it. A table. One chair. A narrow bed pushed against the far wall. Along the logs hung tools, an axe, a saw, a hammer, heavy chains. There were no windows. Only the door. He lowered Amanda onto the floor and crouched beside her. When he pulled the gag from her mouth, she screamed. His response was immediate, a sharp strike across her face, controlled but decisive. Enough to silence her. In a flat, measured voice, he explained that screaming served no purpose. The forest was too vast. No one would hear. If she continued, he would gag her again and leave her bound. Then he laid out the rules. She would remain here. She would follow his instructions. Obedience would make things bearable. Resistance would bring pain. His tone never changed, as calm as someone reciting instructions rather than destroying a life. Her voice shook as she asked why. What did he want from her? James did not answer at once. He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing something invisible. Finally, he said he needed companionship. That he had lived alone for years. That loneliness had hollowed him out. She would stay with him now, live here, and eventually adjust. No one would find her. The cabin lay far from marked trails. He knew the park intimately. Searches would move in the wrong direction. People would assume she was lost, or had fallen into a ravine, or been carried away by the river. He loosened the bindings on her legs but kept her wrists tied. Taking a chain from the wall, he fastened one end to a metal ring embedded in the floor near the bed. The other end he locked around her ankle. The chain allowed limited movement, enough to cross part of the room, never enough to reach the door. Her hands were freed so she could eat and move. But the warning was clear. Any attempt to escape or attack him would mean restraints again, and days without food or water. That was how her captivity began. The first days dissolved into terror. James appeared twice daily, morning and evening, bringing food and water, removing the bucket that served as a toilet and replacing it with another. The meals were basic: canned food, bread, occasionally fish he caught from the stream and cooked on the stove. The water came from a spring, cold and bottled. He spoke little. Mostly commands. Eat. Sleep. Be silent. When he left, he locked the door from the outside. Hours passed in isolation. At first, Amanda fought back. She screamed, begged, threatened him with prison and exposure. He listened without reaction. Once, when her screams grew louder than usual, he tied her, gagged her, and left her without food for 2 days. When he returned, he asked one question: whether she would behave. Weak, starving, terrified, she nodded. He released her and gave her food and water. After that, she screamed less. She learned the cost. On the 4th day, it happened. That evening, he arrived as usual with dinner. He set the plate on the table, sat down, and stared at her for a long time. Then he stood, crossed the room, seized her arm, and dragged her toward the bed. She fought, scratched, bit, struggled, but his strength overpowered hers. He struck her, bound her hands, forced her down. He raped her with brutal indifference to her cries. When it was over, he untied her, walked out, and locked the door. Amanda lay on the bed shaking, tears soaking into the rough fabric beneath her. Pain and shock blurred together. In that moment, she understood the truth: this would not be the last time. She was trapped. There was no escape. Thoughts of ending her life crept in. She studied the chain. Searched for something sharp. Looked at the ceiling beam. But there was nothing. The chain was too short. Every edge had been removed. All that remained was endurance. Waiting. Hope without evidence. On July 30th, the day she was meant to return, Amanda did not come home. In Seattle, her family grew alarmed. Her father contacted Olympic National Park authorities and reported her missing. Rangers checked the logs, found her registration form, and saw the date clearly marked, July 30th. A search was launched almost immediately. 10 rangers, joined by volunteers, moved along the Hoh Rainforest route, inspecting every registered campsite and scanning for any trace she might have left behind. When they reached Campsite 7, the scene stopped them cold. Amanda's tent stood there, slashed open, its contents undisturbed: sleeping bag, mat, clothing, food, all untouched. Her backpack lay beside it, fully packed, nothing missing. There were no signs of a struggle. Only the torn fabric told a story. Footprints marked the soil, one set matching Amanda's boots, another larger, clearly male. They led away from the campsite and into the trees, then vanished after roughly 50 meters where the ground turned rocky. The operation widened. Tracking dogs were brought in. A helicopter equipped with thermal imaging swept the forest, rivers, ravines, and caves within a 15-kilometer radius. Her car was found at the trailhead parking lot, exactly where she had left it. Locked. Keys still hidden in the magnetic box. Everything inside untouched. That discovery confirmed what investigators already suspected: whatever happened occurred deep along the route, not before it. After 2 weeks, the search was halted. The official conclusion stated that Amanda Rose had likely become disoriented, fallen, or suffered an injury. Hypothermia or dehydration were listed as probable causes. Her body, they said, may have been carried off by the river or taken by wildlife. The case was labeled an accident. It remained technically open, but the active effort ended. Her family refused to accept it. They hired private investigators, placed notices, offered rewards. Nothing came back. Inside the hidden cabin, time lost its meaning. Days melted into weeks. Weeks dissolved into months. Amanda no longer knew the date or even the season until her body felt the change. James never spoke of the outside world. There was no calendar. No reference point. Only the forest itself marked the passage of time. Summer's heat faded into autumn chill. Winter followed, brutal and relentless, forcing the stove to burn daily just to keep the hut livable. Then spring returned. Then summer again. James appeared every morning and every evening. He brought food and water. Sometimes vegetables. Sometimes meat. He hunted deer, caught fish, cooked them on the stove. Occasionally, he ate with her, sitting across the table, chewing slowly, staring into nothing. Conversation was rare. When he spoke, it was practical: more firewood, a leak in the roof, supplies running low. Questions about his past were met with silence or single-word replies. The assaults became routine, 2, sometimes 3 times a week. After the first months, Amanda stopped fighting. She learned that resistance only provoked more violence. During those moments, she learned to leave herself, to retreat inward, to imagine she was somewhere else, someone else. It was the only way to survive without breaking completely. The chain around her ankle tore her skin raw. Open wounds formed, then festered. One day, James noticed. He brought ointment, cleaned the sores, wrapped them carefully. He told her, without emotion, that he didn't want her dying from infection. She was expected to take care of herself. He gave her soap, a rag, a bucket for washing. Once a month, under his watch, she was allowed to bathe in a nearby stream. During those moments, the chain was removed, but his knife stayed in his hand. He warned her calmly that if she tried to run, he would catch her and punish her. Amanda tried to learn him, to understand him, to find leverage where none seemed to exist. She asked about his reasons, his past, whether he had a family. Most of the time, he ignored her. Once, about 6 months into her captivity, on a freezing winter night as they sat by the stove, he spoke more than usual. He told her he had been a ranger for 2 decades, working in multiple parks, the last 10 years in Olympic National Park. He said he had once been married. He had a daughter. His wife left 15 years earlier, taking the child with her. She told him she was tired of competing with the wilderness, tired of being alone while he belonged to the forest. She wanted a city life. They divorced. His daughter grew up without him. She lived on the East Coast now. Married. Children of her own. They no longer spoke. After that, there was only work. Patrols. Tourists. Lost hikers. Empty nights in ranger housing. Life, he said, became flat. Colorless. Without meaning. Then, 3 years earlier, he met a woman hiking alone in the park. They talked. She laughed. She listened. She made him feel seen. He offered to show her trails most visitors never find. And she agreed. They traveled the trail together and spent the entire day side by side. When evening came, he invited her to stay in his cabin rather than return to her tent. She agreed. That night, they were close, willingly, gently, without force. In the morning, she left with a promise to write. She never did. He waited. A week passed. Then another. A month. Silence. Only then did he understand what it had been to her, a passing moment, nothing more. Something light, easily forgotten. In his mind, that realization hardened into a belief. That women came, took what they wanted, and vanished. That they left men behind in quiet ruins. The bitterness grew slowly, settling deep. So when he saw Amanda at the campsite, young, alone, unaware, something inside him shifted. A decision formed without words. This one would not leave. If she tried, he would stop her. Permanently. That was where it began. Amanda listened in frozen disbelief. She understood then that she was facing more than a criminal. This was a man living inside a fractured reality, where isolation had twisted into entitlement, where violence felt justified by abandonment. Logic would not reach him. Morality meant nothing here. Persuasion was useless. Only patience remained, waiting for error, weakness, a single opening. Years passed. One. Then another. Amanda learned how to exist inside captivity. She shaped her days into rituals. She woke at dawn as pale light slipped through the cracks in the walls. She stretched, moved her body to keep it alive, washed her face with cold water, ate whatever he left for her. During the long hours alone, she clung to small tasks. She reread the only book he had ever brought her, an old, frayed novel. She counted floorboards. She practiced stillness, trying to quiet her mind before isolation consumed it. In the evenings, when James returned, she spoke softly. She thanked him. Sometimes she smiled. Not from affection. Not from surrender. From survival. She knew hostility would only sharpen his cruelty. So she wore obedience like a mask, waiting for the moment when the mask could fall. That moment arrived in the third year. In early October of 2010, James came in the morning as usual, but something was wrong. His skin looked gray. His breathing labored. A harsh cough shook his body. He said he was sick, likely a bad cold, and that he would bring extra supplies so he wouldn't need to return for several days. He left cans of food, bottles of water, firewood for the stove. Then he locked the door and disappeared. 3 days passed. On the fourth, Amanda heard the lock turn. The door opened. James stumbled inside, clinging to the frame. His eyes were glassy, his body shaking. He barely made it to the chair before collapsing into it, gasping. He muttered that he needed medicine. That there was a first aid kit back at his ranger hut. That he didn't have the strength to reach it alone. Amanda moved as close as the chain allowed. She asked if she could help. He looked at her through a fog of fever and nodded. If she freed herself, he said, she had to promise not to run. She would help him reach the hut and bring back medicine. If she fled, he would die here, and she would remain trapped, locked inside, doomed as well. The key was in his pocket. Without him, there was no way out. She knew it was a trap. She also knew it was the only door that had opened in 3 years. She promised. With shaking hands, James unlocked the chain. It fell to the floor with a dull sound. For the first time since her capture, her ankle was free. No weight. No iron. Movement returned to her body like breath after drowning. She lifted him, let him lean against her, and together they stepped outside. Daylight washed over her. Sunlight filtered through the towering trees. Cold air filled her lungs. The forest stood alive around her. Sky above. Wind against her skin. For a heartbeat, every instinct screamed to run. But she stopped herself. Without the key, she could not escape the cabin forever. And James, even sick, was still dangerous. If she fled blindly, he could shut the door behind her, leave her lost in a wilderness she no longer knew. Freedom, she understood, required more than motion. It required the right moment. And that moment was still forming. They had no supplies with them, no pack, no food, no gear. They moved slowly, James leaning heavily against her, his steps uneven and uncertain. The forest swallowed them as they followed a faint path, crossed a stream over a narrow wooden bridge, and climbed a gentle slope. After about 20 minutes, another structure emerged from the trees. This one was larger. It had windows, a small porch, and a sign fixed to the door. James pulled out a key and unlocked it. Inside, the space looked ordinary. Almost domestic. A bed. A table and chairs. Shelves lined with books and equipment. A radio rested on the table. A first aid kit hung clearly on the wall. James gestured weakly toward it and said the medicine was there, antibiotics, something to reduce the fever. Amanda crossed the room, opened the kit, and saw exactly that, pills, bandages, medical tools. She took the antibiotics and handed them to him. He swallowed one, washing it down with water from a bottle. Then he said he needed to lie down. His body sagged as he stretched out on the bed. His breathing grew rough, irregular. His eyes closed. Amanda stood still, her heart pounding. This is it. He was weak. He might lose consciousness. The keys. The radio. Help was finally within reach. She moved toward the table, lifted the radio, and switched it on. Static filled the room. Then a voice broke through. A dispatcher asked who was calling. Amanda pressed the transmit button. Her voice shook. Words tumbled over one another. She said her name, Amanda Rose. She said she had been missing for 3 years. She said she had been held captive by Ranger James Carter. That he was sick. That she was in his ranger cabin. That she needed help now. Silence followed. Seconds stretched unbearably long. Then the dispatcher responded, careful, controlled, asking her to confirm who she was. Amanda recited details only she could know, her birth date, her home address, her parents' names. The voice on the other end told her help was coming. A helicopter. 20 minutes. Stay where you are. Amanda lowered the radio. She turned around. James was standing behind her. He had risen from the bed. His face was twisted with fury. In his hand was a knife taken from the table. He said she had betrayed him. That she had broken her promise. That she had destroyed everything. That he would go to prison now, and she would pay for it. He charged. Amanda leapt back, seized a chair, and hurled it at him. It struck his shoulder. He stumbled, dropping to one knee. She ran. Out the door. Across the porch. Down the path without knowing where it led. Distance was all that mattered. Behind her came shouting. Footsteps. James followed, injured, but driven. Branches lashed her face. Roots caught her feet. Her lungs burned. Terror carried her forward. She burst into a clearing, tripped, and fell hard to the ground. She turned. James was still coming. 20 meters away. Knife raised. Rage carved into his face. Then the sound cut through everything. The thunder of a helicopter. It roared above the trees, descending into the clearing. Uniformed figures poured out, rangers, police, weapons drawn. They shouted commands. Drop the knife. Stop. James froze. He looked at the helicopter. At the armed officers. At Amanda. Understanding settled in. The fight left him. He let the knife fall, sank to his knees, and covered his face. Officers rushed forward, forced him to the ground, cuffed his hands, and pulled him away. Amanda collapsed where she was. She cried, not from pain, but from release. From the certainty that it was truly over. That the nightmare had ended. A medic reached her, helped her up, wrapped her in an embrace, and told her she was safe. She was airlifted to a hospital in Port Angeles. Doctors documented everything, the scars from the chain around her ankle, old and new injuries, signs of repeated violence, exhaustion, dehydration. A psychologist evaluated her and diagnosed severe post-traumatic stress, explaining that recovery would take time, a long time. Police took her statement. She told them everything. The abduction. The years of captivity. The abuse. As they listened, their expressions darkened, word by word, as the truth finally came into the light. Authorities later confirmed that James Carter had been taken into custody and formally charged with kidnapping, repeated sexual assault, and unlawful imprisonment. The sentence he faced was the harshest possible, life behind bars. Amanda's parents flew in from Seattle as soon as they were notified. The reunion was overwhelming. Her mother and father could hardly process that their daughter was alive. They held her, cried over her, kissed her face again and again. Amanda wept with them, not from fear this time, but from the sensation of being human again, something she had not felt for 3 years. Not property. Not a captive. A person. The trial began a year later, in November 2011. James Carter stood before the court on multiple counts. Amanda testified, recounting her captivity in full. Every detail. Every year. His defense attempted to argue mental instability, presenting records of depression and psychological struggles. But court-appointed psychiatrists concluded that he understood his actions and was fully responsible for them. The jury returned a unanimous verdict, guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced James Carter to 3 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole. As he was escorted from the courtroom, James turned toward Amanda and whispered something under his breath. She did not hear it. She did not want to. That moment marked the final time she ever saw him. After the trial, Amanda focused on rebuilding what had been shattered. She left Seattle, relocated to another city, and changed her name. Therapy became a constant. She joined a support group for survivors of violence. Recovery was slow, painful, and uneven, but step by step, she began to regain pieces of herself. In 2013, Amanda chose to speak publicly. She gave interviews, telling her story not for attention, but as a warning. She wanted people to understand that danger does not always look like danger. That even national parks, places trusted as safe, can hide predators. She urged women who hike alone to be cautious, to verify credentials, to share their routes, and never rely blindly on appearances or uniforms. The National Park Service launched an internal investigation. It confirmed that James Carter had indeed been a ranger for 2 decades. In his final years, colleagues noted he had grown increasingly isolated, avoiding social contact and choosing solitary patrols. No one had suspected what he was capable of. The cabin where Amanda was held turned out to be an old loggers' shelter, abandoned, unmarked on modern maps, known only to those deeply familiar with the land. In response, new regulations were introduced. Rangers were required to patrol in pairs. Psychological evaluations became routine. Visitors were advised to travel in groups whenever possible. Yet the park spans more than 3,000 square kilometers. Absolute control, officials admitted, is impossible. Today, many years later, Amanda lives a quiet life. She works. She has a family. She is raising children of her own. The past, however, has not vanished. The scars remain, on her body and within her mind. She no longer hikes. She avoids forests. Enclosed spaces still trigger anxiety. Therapy continues. Medication helps. But she is alive. She is free. And for her, that truth outweighs everything else.